Okay, after the miller. There was a manciple from an inn of court, to whom all buyers might quite well resort, to learn the art of buying food and drink, for whether he paid cash or not, I think, that he so knew the markets when to buy, he never found himself left high and dry. Now is it not of God a full fair grace, that such a vulgar man has wit to pace the wisdom of a crowd of learned men? Of masters had he more than 3 times 10, who were in law expert and curious, whereof there were a dozen in that house fit to be stewards of both rent and land, of any lord in England who would stand upon his own and live in manner good, and honour debtless, save his head were wood, or live as frugally as he might desire. These men were able to have helped a shire in any case that ever might befall, and yet this manciple outguessed them all. Okay, the manciple is, to me, important for a couple of reasons. All right, first off, what is a manciple? A manciple is somebody who buys the groceries to support the staff at a university. Okay, so he works for, like, say, Oxford or Cambridge. And, the professors, they're busy taking care of their learning and taking care of their students and stuff like that. So they need somebody to do their shopping for them. The manciple takes their money, and then when he goes to market, he shops for deals and saves the difference. So, like, if they give him $50 for groceries and he spends $30, then he pockets the other $20 for himself. So he thinks he's all clever and more intelligent than the college professors. This is kind of similar to when Jonathan Swift was making fun of the people of Laputa because they were, like, always thinking about academic subject matter, that they couldn't do practical things. Chaucer is very similarly, like, I guess, critical of the learned people. Remember, we already have an Oxford cleric who's poor, even though he reads lots and lots of books and is very smart. Now we have professors at a university who are smart, but they're getting gypped by their own manciple, by their own employee. All right. Okay, so manciple, middle class. That seems to be the majority. Oh, that should be guildsman. It seems to be a majority of the pilgrims. Got all that? Moving on. Okay, the Reeve is an interesting character. He tells a wonderful story. Like, it's my favorite story. A Reeve is basically a manager for a wealthy landowner. Let's say you're somebody like the Franklin and you got a lot of land, and you don't want to be a farmer or a rancher. You want to enjoy your wealth. So you would hire a manager to make sure that all your employees are doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's what the Reeve's job is. He's the manager. So he's the guy at Whataburger with the tie on who's telling all the lowly workers what to do. And this Reeve is a good one. He was a slender, choleric man who shaved his beard as close as razor can. His hair was cut round even with his ears. His top was tonsured like a pulpiteer's. Long were his legs, and they were very lean, and like a staff with no calf to be seen. Well could he manage granary and bin, no auditor could ever on him win. He could foretell by drought and by the rain the yielding of his seed and of his grain. His Lord's sheep and his oxen and his dairy, his swine and horses, all his stores, his poultry, were wholly in the steward's managing. And by agreement he'd made reckoning, since his young lord of age was 20 years, yet no man ever found him in arrears. So he managed his money well. There was no agent, hind or herd, who'd cheat, but he knew well his cunning and deceit. They were afraid of him as of the death. His cottage was a good one, on a heath, by green trees, shaded with his dwelling place, much better than his lord could he purchase. Right rich he was in his own private right, seeing he'd pleased his lord by day or night, by giving him or lending of his goods, and so got thanked, but yet got coats and hoods. In youth he learned a good trade, and had been a carpenter, as fine as could be seen. The steward sat a horse that well could trot, and was all dapple gray, and was named Scott. A long surcoat of blue did he parade, and at his side he bore a rusty blade. Of Norfolk was this Reeve of whom I tell, from near a town that men call Badeswell. Bundled he was like friar from chin to croup, and ever he made hindmost of our troop. So he always rode in the rear of the party, probably because he didn't trust anybody and he was always keeping his eye on everybody. But the Reeve is actually a perfect Reeve. Like slender because he doesn't eat too much, because he's economical. Well shaven because he's very well groomed. Keeps his hair cut. He doesn't like let anybody slip his, his management style. Like he's always watching, making sure that everybody's doing what they're doing. And he manages his money well. He's so good with money that his own lord has to borrow money from him. He's got a, nicely maintained house that's almost as good as his master's because he keeps it so clean and so well maintained. So the Reeve is an interesting character because he's so perfect, and he's going to come at odds with the Miller, who is so not perfect. Okay, the Reeve I would put in middle class because he's not nobility, he's not military, and he's not clergy. So, and he's definitely not lower class. So for the Reeve, he's a farm manager. He is a strict, well-groomed manager who wants everything perfect. And by the way, he himself is kind of perfect. And he's so good with money that his lord owes him. And he's a carpenter. That comes into play later. That's one of the reasons why he doesn't like the Miller, because the Miller makes fun of a carpenter. Kind of silly, but, so is Geoffrey Chaucer. Okay, so now we come to the Summoner. The Summoner is actually a member of the clergy. It's his job. Now you got to remember, like back in these days, the Catholic Church was a government. Like the Pope was like a king, and he had a feudal system going of his own. The Summoner would arrive to people's houses and give them paperwork saying that they were sinners, and for their sins they had to stand trial, and be tried by the Catholic Church. So he was kind of like the Seth Rogen character in Pineapple Express, except he was even more disgruntled and selfish than he was. Okay, so here we go. A summoner was with us in that place, who had a fiery red, cherubic face. For eczema he had, his eyes were narrow, as hot he was and lecherous as a sparrow. He's got really bad skin. Like, his face is covered with, like, really bad acne. And it's red and bumpy and it's disgusting. With black and scabby brows and scanty beard, he had a face that little children feared. Wow, children are afraid of his face because he's so ugly. There was no mercury, sulfur, or litharge. No borax, ceruse, tartar could discharge. Notice the use of list again. That's Chaucer. Nor ointment that could cleanse enough or bite to free him of his boils and pimples white. Ugh. Nor of the bosses resting on his cheeks. Well loved he garlic, onions, aye, and leeks. So he ate lots of onions and similar vegetables. And drinking of strong wine as red as blood, then would he talk and shout as madman would. And when a deal of wine he'd poured within, then would he utter no word save Latin. Some phrases had he learned, say 2 or 3, which he had garnered out of some decree. No wonder, for he'd heard it all the day, and all you know right well, that even a jay can call out what, as well as can the Pope. But then for aught else, into him you'd grope, 'twas found he'd spent his whole philosophy, just quaestio quid juris, would he cry. He was a noble rascal, and a better comrade 'twould be hard to find. Why he would suffer for a quart of wine, some good fellow to have his concubine, a 12-month, and excuse him to the full. Besides ourselves, though, he could pluck a gull, and if he chanced upon a good fellow, he would instruct him never to have awe, in such a case, of the archdeacon's curse, except a man's soul lie within his purse. For in his purse the man should punished be. The purse is the archdeacon's hell, said he. But well I know he lied in what he said. A curse ought ever guilty man to dread, for curse can kill as absolution save, and where significant as to the grave, in his own power had he, and at ease, the boys and girls of all the diocese, and knew their secret, and by counsel led, a garland had he set upon his head, large as a tavern's wine-bush on a stake. A buckler had he made of bread they bake. Okay, I read a lot there, and we need to unpack it. All right, he's got bad breath, he's got bad skin, he's an alcoholic. Oh, this part is interesting. All right, he pretends to speak Latin because back in those days, if you spoke Latin and you lived in England, you were considered educated. Now, he was not educated, but he spoke Latin, but he didn't know what he was saying. He spoke Latin because he worked in a court and, like, he picked up some stuff. But whenever he quoted it, like, quaestio quid juris, he didn't know what he was saying. So if a person was actually learned and knew Latin, they would think that the summoner is an idiot. Okay, what else? Okay, he took bribes. Like, that's what this part is about. Like, let's say, okay, the summoner, basically, if you're sinning, like, let's say you have a mistress, and that's illegal in the eyes of the church, then he would take a summons from the church saying that you're going to be tried as an adulterer. And so you have to show up to court, and you could end up in prison, or you could have been with a big fine. But what the summoner would do would be like, hey, if you pay me, then I'll make the summons go away and you don't have to appear in court. So he would take bribes from people to avoid going to religious court. All right, what else is wrong with this guy? Well, I think you got the message. He's a pretty terrible human being. Okay, and he carries a cake around with him like as a shield, which I think is kind of weird. So let's put him in his place. Okay, I would place the summoner under clergy because he basically works for the church. The church was very corrupt back in those days. Going to heaven would cost you a lot of money. So the summoner, here's what we know. He had bad skin, bad breath, takes bribes, summons folks to church court for their sins. Just a bad dude. Like, this is before Martin Luther, reformed the church. Okay, and the last character of note, other than the host, is the pardoner. He also tells a tale. With him there rode a gentle pardoner of Roncesvalles, his friend and his compeer. Straight from the court of Rome had journeyed he. Loudly he sang, "Come hither, love, to me." The summoner joining with a burden round was never horn of half so great a sound. This pardoner had hair as yellow as wax, but lank it hung as does a strike of flax. In wisps hung down such locks as he'd on head, and with them he is shoulders overspread. Okay, so he's got like thin, yellow, greasy hair. But then they dropped in stringy, one by one. But as to hood, for sport of it, he'd none. He didn't wear a hat. Though it was packed in wallet all the while, it seemed to him he went in latest style. Disheveled, save for cap, his head all bare, as shiny eyes he had as has a hare. That means a rabbit. He had a fine Veronica sewed to cap. His wallet lay before him in his lap, stuffed full of pardons, brought from Rome all hot. Okay, so I guess now's a good time for me to tell you what a pardoner is. All right, back in those days, if you had been a sinner, you could buy forgiveness from the Pope. The Pope would sign letters saying you are forgiven. And he would then give them to a pardoner, and the pardoner would sell them and give the money back to the church. Back then, the church was very much a money-making business, and the pardoner and the summoner and the friar took full advantage of this. All right. A voice he had that bleated like a goat. No beard had he, nor ever should he have, for smooth his face as he'd just had a shave. I think he was a gelding or a mare. What they're saying is that the pardoner is very effeminate. He doesn't have a lot of testosterone, so he doesn't have facial hair. He can't grow a beard, and he's got long blonde hair, and he sings like a bird. But in his craft, from Berwick unto Ware, was no such pardoner in any place. For in his bag he had a pillow-case, the which he said was our true lady's veil. Okay, this is juicy material right here. He carries around a piece of cloth that's used as a pillowcase. But he tells people that it's our true lady's veil. Which means he's saying that, hey, you see this cloth that I'm holding right here? This used to be the head, the shawl of the Virgin Mary. And so he would then sell it for like 10 times its value because it's a holy relic. So this is how he made extra money. Besides selling pardons, he would also sell phony relics. He said he had a piece of the very sail that good St. Peter had what time he went upon the sea. So when St. Peter tried to walk on water, he's claiming that he has fabric from the sail. Now, he's not telling the truth. He's just scamming people. Which time he went upon the sea till Jesus changed his bent. He had a Latin cross set full of stones, and in a bottle had he some pig's bones. But with these relics, when he came upon some simple parson, then this paragon, and that one day more money stood to gain than the poor dupe in 2 months would attain. Okay, so he would take pig's bones and say that they are saints' bones and sell them to a priest who didn't know any better. Very corrupt. All right. In that one day more money stood to gain than the poor dupe in 2 months could attain. Okay. And thus, with flattery and such like japes, he made the parson and the rest his apes, that means his fools. But yet, to tell the whole truth at the last, he was in church a fine ecclesiast. Lying. Well could he read a lesson or a story, but best of all he sang an offertory. For well he knew that when that song was sung, then might he preach, and all with polished tongue, to win some silver, as he right well could. Therefore he sang so merrily and so loud. Okay, so the pardoner is all about making that money, taking advantage of people who, have religious faith. He'll sell fake saints' bones. He'll sell fake holy relics, or he'll just preach, and his preaching is so good that people will give him money. Okay, I'm going to put the pardoner in the same category as the clergy, because basically he works for the church. Yes, it's a corrupt church, but a church nonetheless. He sells pardons, sells fake holy relics, and preaches just to make money, and he's extremely effeminate. He can sing, and people don't know if he's a guy or a girl.